All right, Exodus 16, let's call this one Looking Forward, because we're going to see a number of themes that are actually going to allow us to look forward to the end of the entire Pentateuch, that being the first 5 books of the Bible ending in Deuteronomy, which carry us through really the end of Moses' ministry. But before we get there, we've got at least 3 themes that we should probably look on that represent 3 habits that the children of Israel would do really well to leave behind right now, but they're not going to, and it's going to affect the plans that God has for them, something we're going to see toward the end of this chapter. And then ultimately it's going to show us what their future is going to look like. And it's not going to be entirely great, but it's also going to show us how, even though Israel is described as a light to the Gentiles, in some ways, unfortunately, they are not all that different from Egypt. And so they are a great representation of things we've said before, of how all humanity struggles with some of the same tendencies. And in this particular chapter, 3 of those tendencies are: 1, grumbling. The second one's going to be displaced aggression, who they're grumbling against. And then the third is not listening to sound counsel. Beginning in verse 1 of chapter 16, it's going to say, they set out from Elim, and all the congregation of the people of Israel came to the wilderness of Sin, ironically enough, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the 2nd month after they had departed from the land of Egypt. And the whole congregation of the people of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. And the people of Israel said to them, would that we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the meat pots and ate bread to the full. For you have brought us into this wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger. So that is going to mark the grumbling. Obviously, the displaced aggression is against Moses and Aaron. Their response we're going to see in verse 7, or at least Moses' response, when it reads, and in the morning you shall see the glory of the Lord, because he has heard your grumbling against the Lord. For what are we that you grumble against us? And he's helping them to see that their gripe is not with the messenger. They're doing what we commonly call in this culture killing the messenger. And they're not literally killing Moses, they're going at him. And so he is simply the intermediary between them and God. So they're displacing their aggression against God at Moses. And the third thing they're going to do is, when communicated clear instructions from Moses, or really from the Lord by Moses, they're just not going to listen. Beginning in verse 19, once God actually gives them the manna, this is going to be what we notice. And Moses said to them, let no one leave any of it over till the morning. But they did not listen to Moses. And so ultimately, this is a chapter where God is going to give them a preview of what he has planned for them, because in verses 22 through 26, he is going to talk about the Sabbath, their day off. Doesn't everybody want to talk about their day off, or at least just be able to enjoy it? That's what he's describing for them. But it's not just a day off periodically every week as they're going into the promised land. This is something that's pointing forward to their actual rest in the promised land. How do we know? Because the Hebrew writer is going to say it's not just a symbol for them, it's a symbol for us, and the rest that awaits us, those who believe in God, like Israel, waiting for the promised Messiah. It foretells the rest that we can all look forward to if we can break from bad habits like these. And ultimately, why is it that we need to break bad habits? Well, because it starts with bad choices, and that's all it is at this point. It honestly, in a lot of ways, is a series of bad choices at this point, because they're not only grumbling against Moses now for food, they grumbled after God delivered them from the Red Sea for water when he left them for 3 days to see what they would do. And going towards the Red Sea, they grumbled about the fact that God brought them there to die when the promise was, no, I'm going to deliver you in the promised land. Just hold on. He's got an answer to what seems to be certain death in front of you and behind you. And so ultimately, he has seen a tendency in them that he is repeatedly testing to see if they will break, and that is the tendency to grumble as soon as they're unhappy. But their choice to not break that tendency is going to lead them into something that we'll notice in verse 35. The people of Israel ate the manna for 40 years. See, it didn't take 40 years to get to the promised land, but because they never broke with their bad habits, they ate it for the rest of their lives. And so ultimately, a food that they complained about for a year, that's pretty much a year or two is all they would have needed to eat it, they ended up eating it forever. And so what's the lesson for us? If we can stop our bad choices that turn into bad habits, we don't have to live with the kind of regret we see in Exodus 17.